It was never created to be stopped. The war beast wasn't born, it was engineered by hands long turned to dust. Its origin remains buried under collapsed empires and lost archives, but its purpose was always the same: destruction without hesitation, obedience to no one. When it was released, whether by accident or cruelty, it became the galaxy's undoing. The first system it touched was reduced to silence in hours. No distress signals, no remains. Just orbital ash and tectonic fractures that pulsed across dead planets like shockwaves. 12 fleets were dispatched. All failed. Not one returned intact. Data recovered from black box fragments told of a creature immune to pain, immune to persuasion, immune to logic. It learned faster than any AI, struck harder than any superweapon, and showed a savagery even war veterans couldn't comprehend. It didn't just kill. It dismantled societies. The galaxy responded with fear wrapped in protocol. It was categorized, analyzed, and named. Crawl Protocol Threat Alpha 0. The War Beast. Its design was unmatched, its physiology constantly shifting, adapting, reacting. One cycle it grew bioplasma glands to melt hulls. Next, a photosensitive membrane to intercept stealth. If it encountered resistance, it became immune to it the next time. There were no next times. 39 civilizations engaged it. All failed. Some used black hole traps. Others sacrificed moons. One race detonated its own homeworld trying to end it. None succeeded. Survivors, those who lived long enough to speak, described the same thing: a presence that walked like dread itself. No expressions. No words. Only motion. When it moved, it wasn't just killing, it was erasing fear by becoming fear itself. The Galactic Accord called an emergency summit. For the first time in recorded history, predator species and prey sat at the same table. Aggressors begged beside pacifists. The enemy was no longer one another. The enemy had no politics, no hunger, no purpose beyond execution. And it was moving with patternless precision through star sectors, consuming knowledge, culture, and resistance like oxygen. They tried everything. Psychic links burned out minds within seconds. Quantum leashes snapped before they engaged. It shrugged off gravity warps like static. It could see in spectrums unknown. It predicted tactics before they were used. Biological viruses? It absorbed them and mutated stronger. AI-controlled assaults? They fell into its predictive net like toys thrown at a hurricane. It fought like instinct-married machine, brutal and perfect. After every encounter, it evolved. The Accord had one last option: isolation. Let it wander into the galactic edge. Cut off navigation. Close wormholes. Remove temptation. But it didn't wander. It chose. It chose its path. Its trajectory wasn't random. It was curving inward, toward the Orion Arm, toward a small yellow star. Toward Earth. Panic was instantaneous. Diplomats flooded Earth's channels. Dozens of species screamed warnings. Evacuate. Hide. Burn your skies before it reaches you. Earth's response wasn't warships. It wasn't surrender either. It was silence. Some believed the humans were ignorant. Others thought them arrogant. But among the elder races, whispers began, whispers too dangerous to say aloud. That maybe the war beast was not choosing randomly. Maybe it was returning to something. Maybe it was being called. No one believed Earth had built it. Their biology didn't match. Their weapons were crude by Accord standards. But what if, just what if, the thing that birthed it once saw humanity as its successor? Fleets turned away from Earth. Not out of cruelty, but out of fear. No one wanted to be near the planet when the war beast arrived. It had taken years, hundreds of light years, to reach this point. The destruction behind it could be traced like breadcrumbs, smoldering debris, extinguished suns, echoes of civilizations. Now only one question remained, broadcast across every star network still functioning: what happens when the unstoppable meets the unnoticed? No one had an answer. But everyone was watching. Earth didn't panic. While other species begged, shouted, and mourned preemptively, humanity remained still. Their satellites adjusted, algorithms projected, and models simulated every possible entry vector. But no parades, no last rites. The world went quiet, not out of fear, but calculation. Earth's history had shaped them for such moments. They had survived not because they were the strongest, but because they refused to die conveniently. Alien ambassadors arrived in orbit, demanding cooperation, warning of extinction. Their tone shifted when humans didn't plead. They asked if humanity understood what was coming. Earth's only reply: "We heard." No grand strategy was unveiled. No hyperweapons showcased. Instead, protocols activated, unpublicized, cold, efficient. Civilian populations relocated silently. Communications streamlined. No dramatics. No declarations. Just action. In deep vaults and silent bunkers, old war theorists emerged, not with blueprints for battle, but with psychological profiles. They studied not just the war beast, but the fear it bred. They understood something no other species had considered: the creature didn't just kill. It broke identity. It unraveled belief before it tore flesh. Humanity's solution wasn't confrontation. It was containment of spirit. Not the beasts, their own, Children were educated about it, not hidden from it. Schools told the truth: there is a thing coming, and no one has stopped it. But you're not no one. The cultural shift was subtle but absolute. Where other species ran, humans prepared to be still. Entire cities trained in psychological resilience. Meditation routines became standard. Emotional regulation became as critical as food rations. Religion didn't promise protection, it promised clarity. Military divisions were not mobilized for attack. Instead, they were assigned containment corridors, not to trap the creature, but to protect civilians from responding with panic. Human command understood that terror fed the myth. It had to be met with indifference. Not because the beast was weak, but because fear was useless. Earth didn't trust in force. They trusted in endurance. Through history, they had watched empires rise and fall not from invasion, but internal collapse. Rome. Mongols. Nations long gone, not because they were struck, but because they bent. The war beast was simply another test in a long series of reckonings. And humans had grown familiar with reckonings. AI pattern analysts mapped the war beast's past movements, trying to find purpose. No logic emerged. Yet Earth kept searching. They weren't trying to predict its path. They were trying to understand its mind. What did it ignore? What did it hesitate near? When anomaly emerged, it had never destroyed anything that did not react to it. Every civilization it crushed had attempted to stop it. Every defense had failed. But in that failure, a pattern emerged. Resistance was provocation. So Earth chose not to provoke. Not out of cowardice, but strategy. What could not be stopped, could still be redirected. Human psychologists developed protocols for interaction, not attack, not defense, but engagement. If the time came, someone had to meet it without aggression. Not as a soldier. Not as prey. As something else entirely. Human media went dark. Not censored, disconnected. The spectacle was denied. The beast thrived in fear, and Earth refused to feed it. Even entertainment changed. Stories shifted from conflict to control. Training simulations were no longer about survival. They became about stillness. Who could stand firm longest? Who could hold their gaze steady? Who could speak last? Among the alien observers, confusion turned to suspicion. Why weren't the humans doing what every other race had done? Why weren't they preparing for war? Had they given up, or had they seen something others missed? Some thought Earth had a secret weapon. Others believed they had a deal with the beast. But the truth was simpler. Humans had accepted the worst-case scenario, and prepared to outlive it. One transmission leaked from a classified Earth archive, later decoded by a foreign AI. It read: "We've tried fear before. It cost us nothing but time. Now we try presence. If it fails, we lose nothing. If it works, we rewrite what's possible. Asterisk. The war beast continued its approach, silent as ever, tearing through rogue debris and outdated satellites. Earth watched without blinking. They didn't send a fleet. They didn't send bombs. They sent nothing. They waited. Because they believed that survival didn't always wear armor. Sometimes it wore patience. It reached the atmosphere without resistance. Earth didn't fire. No defenses activated. No warnings sounded. The war beast entered with the same unstoppable motion it had carried across stars, unchallenged, untouched. It fell toward the surface like a promise of annihilation, its form shifting midair, adjusting for terrain, density, and atmospheric drag. There was no attempt to slow it. There didn't need to be. It chose where it would land. The impact shattered trees and silence alike. Soil exploded. Pressure waves rippled for kilometers. Wildlife scattered. Dust hung suspended as the war beast uncoiled, scanning. There was no army. No fire. No weapons drawn. Nothing provoked it. Still it moved. It hunted not because it was threatened, but because it always had. And yet this time something felt off. It advanced through abandoned streets. Structures stood untouched, not because they were defended, but because no one remained to witness their destruction. The absence was calculated. This wasn't retreat, it was removal. Designed. Precise. The war beast paused, sensing. Its movements slowed. Adaptation algorithms probed the surroundings. No hostility. No signals. No traps. Then it saw something. A singular presence. Not military. Not armored. A child. Standing alone on cracked pavement, she didn't run. No fear spiked in her posture. Her hands were empty. Her stance relaxed. To the beast, she didn't register as threat or prey, just anomaly. That was unusual. Everything fit into categories. Everything obeyed instinct. She did not. She didn't scream, didn't flee, didn't plead. Her body language wasn't familiar in any database. She simply watched. It moved closer. Slow. Cautious. Curious. She raised her hand, palm open, no trembling. Then she spoke. One word. Sit. The command struck deeper than sound. It wasn't volume. It wasn't tone. It was the authority beneath it. The certainty. There was no negotiation in her voice. No force either. Just expectation. The war beast hesitated, not out of confusion, but instinct. Some fragment deep within its engineered mind reeled. The command wasn't processed through combat filters. It bypassed defenses entirely, and reached something else. Conditioning? No. It felt older than that. Some imprint beneath layers of code and flesh responded. And slowly, impossibly, the war beast lowered itself. Its limbs retracted. Spine bent. Claws dulled against the ground. It sat. Not in defeat. Not in submission. In acknowledgement. The child walked forward and placed her small hand on its massive head. No reaction. The galaxy watched. Thousands of surveillance satellites captured the moment. Alien leaders froze. Some refused to believe it. Others demanded explanation. But there was none. A child had spoken. The monster had obeyed. Panic shifted into something else, silence, then awe. News feeds across sectors halted other stories. No expert had predicted this outcome. Every simulation, every scenario, none contained this variable. No doctrine had prepared for obedience without coercion. Analysts reviewed every frame. The child showed no aggression. No displays of dominance. And yet she had held authority stronger than weapons. Her command carried no violence, but it overrode violence entirely. The war beast did not retreat. It did not attack. It remained seated, still as stone. Eyes active, breath steady, posture calm. As though it had found order. For the first time in its existence, it had not been challenged. It had not been resisted. It had been addressed. And it listened, No force had ever done that. No shield had turned its fury. But a word had redirected it. Alien council sessions spiraled into chaos. Were humans dangerous in ways no one understood? Was this control or coincidence? Had the creature recognized her? Was their latent programming triggered by tone or posture? Questions piled into dead ends. Human officials issued no statements. They didn't celebrate. They didn't gloat. There was no claim of victory. Because, to them, it wasn't one. It wasn't about defeating a monster. It was about meeting it. Not on its terms, but theirs. As the sun dipped behind distant trees, the child sat beside the beast. They remained like that, unbothered, unshaken. A machine bred for destruction and a human born into chaos. Neither moved. Neither needed to. Something older than fear, older than war, passed between them. And the galaxy had no words for what it had just witnessed. It wasn't submission. It wasn't defeat. The war beast obeyed not out of fear but recognition. Scientists argued endlessly, parsing every millisecond of its motion. Muscle tension. Pupil dilation. Neural surges. None of it matched prior behavior. Nothing aligned with known patterns. The beast had responded to hundreds of threats, survived every weapon, adapted to every trap. But it had never stopped moving. Until now. Biologists focused on instinctual reactions. The creature's DNA had been engineered, that much was certain. A mix of apex predators, designed to override empathy and resist control. But buried deep within those sequences, they found dormant strands, canine, even equine, neural patterns, intended for loyalty, but locked away by overlapping aggression coding. Until that moment, they'd never activated. Psychologists rewound the footage again and again, searching for the anomaly. The child's tone? Her stance? No spikes in aggression, no dominance displays. Just calm. She hadn't demanded authority. She had expected it. And that expectation triggered something ancient inside the warbeast, something it didn't know it carried. It had spent lifetimes crushing resistance, but it had never encountered calm command. It didn't know how to process absence of fear. AI language models attempted to dissect the word. Sit. They ran tone analysis, syntactic overlays, frequency layering. Still nothing. The word itself wasn't special. Billions used it every day. But coming from someone who wasn't posturing, who wasn't desperate, it became more than language. It became law. Alien cultures watched in silence. The strongest war minds of 3 galaxies failed to understand what had occurred. Some accused Earth of hiding control tech. Others believed genetic sabotage. But no proof emerged. The child hadn't activated a mechanism. She had exposed a flaw in the beast's very being, a vulnerability not to harm, but to harmony. What terrified the watchers wasn't the event. It was what followed. The war beast no longer roared. No longer scanned for threats. It followed. It shadowed. It adapted to her pace. When she stopped, it paused. When she moved, it stayed close. Not as a pet. Not as a prisoner. As something else. Something bound not by force, but decision. Theories flooded galactic forums. Was this evidence that the war beast had never been rogue, but searching? Had it been hunting violence to find something it couldn't articulate? Was its path not destruction, but desperate calibration? For the first time, its journey made sense. Every species it destroyed had responded with fear, panic, attack. And that confirmed its aggression. But now, for the first time, it had been seen, not as a weapon, not as a curse, but as something that could choose. That shook everyone. Alien generals quietly retracted planned offensives. Empires halted military AI projects. If something so monstrous could be tamed without a shot, then what did that say about their own doctrines? What did it say about humanity's potential? Not in war, but in presence? Humans didn't gloat. No celebrations were aired. No officials claimed credit. Their silence was deliberate. The message was clear: they had nothing to prove. And that alone shifted the balance of power. The Council of Species released a cautious statement, framing the event as unprecedented and unresolved. But they knew better. Their simulations no longer held weight. The variable had changed. Humanity had proven it could alter behavior not through threat, but through unwavering steadiness. Children across galaxies were shown the footage. Not as horror, but as hope. That there existed a way to stop chaos not with retaliation, but clarity. One species had done it without fleets, weapons, or fear. Just a child. A single word. A decision not to react with instinct, but intention. In classified circles, the event was renamed. No longer the Earth encounter. It was dubbed the shift. Because after that day, every race had to reconsider what power looked like. It wasn't size. It wasn't firepower. It was the ability to remain still while everything screamed at you to run. And still, no one knew who the child was. No names released. No interviews. Only a single file surfaced from a deep Earth archive. When the war ends, don't ask who fought. Ask who didn't need to. And so the war beast followed. Not leashed. Not coerced. Just willing. And that terrified the galaxy more than anything it had ever done. It didn't leave. It stayed. Days passed, then weeks. The war beast remained where it had obeyed. Not restrained, not watched, simply present. It didn't return to the stars. It didn't destroy. It waited. Moved only when she moved. Slept only when she slept. Nothing in its behavior suggested confusion or malfunction. It had made a decision. That was more unsettling than any prior act of violence. The galaxy expected Earth to exploit it. Harness the war beast, parade it, use it. Instead, Earth did nothing. No broadcasts. No threats. No declarations. The beast wasn't turned into a tool. It was treated like an answer that needed no follow-up. Its presence changed everything, not because of what it could do, but because of what it now refused to do. It had become the only thing more dangerous than a weapon, an independent force that chose humanity without coercion. Other worlds panicked. Intelligence agencies tried to simulate human command dynamics. They failed. Voice actors couldn't replicate the tone. Neural models couldn't fake the authority. They mistook control for volume, posture, intimidation. They missed the truth. It wasn't dominance that tamed the beast. It was absence of fear without presence of threat. And that could not be faked. Earth didn't engage diplomatically. They stopped sending envoys. Not as a statement of isolation, but because they had no demands. The war beast wasn't a bargaining chip. It wasn't leveraged. It was accepted. And that unspoken message created the most stable chaos the galaxy had ever seen. Empires paused offensives. Alliances reevaluated priorities. Former enemies held ceasefires indefinitely, unsure what Earth would do if provoked. Fear of retaliation was never voiced. But the possibility loomed, unmeasured and undefined. No one knew the limits of the bond. Could the war beast be commanded again? Would it obey others? Was it loyal to one child, or to all of humanity? No answers came. Earth's silence made those questions unbearable. Cultural shifts began subtly. In once proud warrior species, schools began teaching restraint as strength. Entire civilizations turned inward, rethinking what influence meant. The idea that a planet could disarm the most terrifying creation in history without firing a single shot, without even trying, undermined every previous definition of power. It wasn't a fluke. That was the most disturbing part. Everything Earth had done was intentional. Calm under pressure. Refusal to engage. Measured quiet. The war beast had responded to something deliberate. Something chosen. And it had chosen in return. The child vanished from public record. No media. No appearances. No monuments. The message was embedded in the silence. It wasn't about her. It never was. It was about what humanity could become when it stopped reacting and started defining. A species that didn't fight for dominance, but didn't surrender either. A paradox, still and immovable, yet decisive. Some planets began calling Earth the quiet seat. Not a throne. Not a command center. A place from which things changed without motion. Others followed, not because they were forced, but because ignoring Earth now felt like ignoring gravity. The war beast became a constant in the solar system. Stationed near the moon, motionless unless needed. It was never deployed. It didn't need to be. Its presence was enough. Any attempt to threaten Earth, even in theory, was met with silence, and that silence carried weight no weapon ever could. Legends grew. Not wild exaggerations, but quiet observations. Ships that passed too close reported a sensation, like being watched by something older than time. They left without incident, but they didn't return. Not out of fear, but reverence. For the first time, Earth was not seen as a target, nor as an underdog. It was viewed as a pivot. The axis upon which the next chapter of galactic history might turn, not with bloodshed, but with a whisper. A presence that needed nothing but patience. And the war beast waited. Not as a guardian. Not as a pet. As something new. A force realigned, not through battle, but through acknowledgement. The kind only one species had offered. Without ceremony. Without drama. Just truth. The galaxy never saw the child again. But no one forgot her. Because sometimes, legacy isn't built on action. It's built on the moment you choose not to flinch. And when the stars spoke of power from then on, they didn't speak of fleets or fire. They spoke of the word that made the impossible sit still.